You know that feeling you have when you're so hyped for something? I mean, you're just incredibly hyped, and you finally go and see what you're excited for, and it lives up to the expectations. Not only that, but surpassing your expectations and your hype. It's a good fucking feeling. Dune Part 2 is finally here. After much delays due to the writer's strike, we finally had the conclusion to this Dune story. Denis Villeneuve is back at the director's chair, including the returning cast members of Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides, and Zendaya as Chani, and Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. It's finally here, guys, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this because, man, Dune 2 fucking rocks, man. This movie's fantastic. I don't think I've been this hyped for a movie since, like, Dune 1 back in 2021. Yes, last year was a phenomenal year for films, but Dune 2 was the main thing I was so excited for last year. And because of the delay, I was extremely let down. I wanted to see it last year so bad, but man, it was worth the wait. This film is just magical. It is majestic. This is one of the greatest sci-fi films I have ever seen. Part 2 immediately takes place right after Part 1. Paul has set out to seek the Fremen to lead them to salvation while trying to take down the evil Harkonnens in the process. And on the way, Paul learns what it means to become a Fremen, the ways of Arrakis, and what it truly means to be a Duke. And you could say that the first film was one giant setup leading to this great war between the Fremen and the Harkonnens. And yes, that is true, Part 1 was definitely the setup to the big stuff that happens in Part 2. But if Part 1 was the setup, Part 2 is the giant all-out war we've all been waiting for to see. This film, it is just a eye to behold. I mean, I just cannot express how fantastic this film is, from the directing to the writing to the story to the action to the cinematography. Everything about this film is top-notch perfection. And the story here is pretty much one giant battle between the Fremen and the Harkonnens, while you have Paul Atreides helping out the Fremen as this Messiah character. You see, some Fremen believe that there is a Messiah that will come down and bring peace and honor and balance to Arrakis, leading the Fremen to salvation. But at the same time, you have other Fremen who think that the prophecy is all made up. So you have this very interesting message about believing in false prophets and believing in other political messages and what you should believe and not believe, and don't get tied up and twisted in the lies of prophets. For a book that was written back in the 60s, this is a message that is still very relevant to this day, and it was very important for Denis Villeneuve to get that message across correctly in this film, because that is one of the major plot points of the book. And seeing it done so well here, and seeing the messages done so correctly, just truly brings honor to this source material. Frank Herbert would be so proud of this movie. Okay, so there's a lot of talk about with praises for this film, so I start out with my biggest one, and that is the performances. These are some of the best performances I have seen for any sci-fi film, like, ever. Paul Atreides, played by, once again, Timothée Chalamet, is played so damn good. Timothée Chalamet gives his best performance, in my opinion, ever. He does a great job playing this morally corrupt character about if he should go along with this false prophecy and become this prophet and lead the Fremen to salvation, even if it does mean that he's going to end up killing a lot of people in the process. He does have such a complex morality to him where he becomes one of the most interesting characters, like, in any sci-fi thing I've ever seen. I mean, the character of Paul Atreides is so, like, filled with many, many layers to where you don't know really if he's a good guy or a bad guy by the end. Javier Bardem does a great job playing Stilgar. I do appreciate the change to his character. They do make him more of a comedic relief in this film to lighten the mood and lighten the tension of some parts of the film, and also making it a bit more funny for general audiences who don't want to see a full-on depressing sci-fi film. He does a very, very good job in every scene that he's in, really does stand out. And Rebecca Ferguson once again plays a phenomenal job as Lady Jessica, being this malicious person behind the scenes, pulling all the strings by spreading out this false prophecy, by spreading out all this false information about how a savior will come down and save the Fremen. Because she's also part of this faction, the Bene Gesserit, who are also behind the scenes, spreading out false rumors all across the galaxy for their own political gain. Which once again adds into the themes of false prophets and falsehoods of political factions, and how you shouldn't trust everything that you hear and see. But the biggest standout and biggest surprise for me was Zendaya as Chani. Now I think Zendaya is a pretty good actress, I do love her in the Spider-Man films, but I didn't think if she had the talent to elevate the important character of Chani in a big story such as Dune. But man, she fully knocked it out of the park. I mean, her performance is fantastic, being the only one a part of the Fremen who fully realized, hey, this false prophecy is the thing that's going to bring us to our downfall. This whole prophecy is going to bring down the Fremen. Like, her character is one of the most important parts of Dune, so it was very important for Zendaya to get this character right. And man, she just nails it here, man. She does a phenomenal job. And the relationship between Paul and Chani was very important to get done correctly here. And man, it is done so well. Paul and Chani, their relationship is so important because Chani's the one that's leading Paul to learn about the ways of the Fremen, but also Paul is trying to, decide if he should be this prophet or not, while Chani doesn't believe in the prophecy. So they have this dynamic pull and tug between them of, hey, I love you, but you cannot do this prophecy. And then Paul's over here like, I need to do this prophecy to lead you guys to freedom. And there's this very complex, in-depth love between these two, how they do love each other, even though their morals are completely opposite. Now let's talk about the visuals. This film is gorgeous. This is one of the most beautiful sci-fi films, beautiful films I have ever seen. I am begging you, go see this in IMAX. It is totally worth it. I mean, there were so many shots in this film that had me just floored at how beautiful it looked. The scale and scope of Arrakis truly feels like an actual world, an actual planet that you can go to for how stunning all the visuals are. I mean, I cannot believe that for a film that had this big of a budget, looks better than most Marvel movies that have like twice that budget. This film is just complete eye candy. I mean, there were so many visual effects and so many shots where I'm wondering, how the hell do they even pull this off? Like, how the hell do they even do this? I mean, it's truly a magnificent beauty of a film to look at. I mean, the best way to describe this film is just epic. Everything about it is just epic in its scale, the way it looks, the story, the acting, the chemistry, and the music. My god, the music. This is Hans Zimmer's best score in my opinion. Hands down, I cannot wait to get this soundtrack on vinyl. I cannot wait to just listen to this soundtrack every day. Man, oh my god, the music is just euphoric to the ears. I just can't stop gushing about how beautiful everything in this film is. Like, everything is just so freaking beautiful. I mean, this is just a love letter, not just to Dune fans, but to fans of film and cinema in general. Now, if I had a few complaints, they're very, very small, and that's, I wanted to see more of some certain characters. Christopher Walken, he does a phenomenal job as the Emperor, though unfortunately he's not in it for that long. I think they're saving his character up for the next film in this series. Baron Harkonnen, played once again by Stellan Skarsgård. Once again, super intimidating, super disgusting to look at. But once again, he's kind of put to the sideline here compared to the first film, which does make sense because his role is shortened in the book, in the second half of the book. But I still would have liked to see him a bit more, because there were parts in the book that he's not in this part of the movie. So I feel like they could have done a little bit more with this character. And also, Feyd-Rautha played perfectly by Austin Butler. he is one of the most intimidating villains I have seen in a sci-fi film, and I was just left wanting to see him more. Every scene that he's in, he steals the show. I loved every single part that he was in, but I was just wanting to see him just a little bit more. I wish you could have seen a little bit more of his character. You can tell that some parts of the film were cut out, and that this film was supposed to be like maybe 3.5 hours long. Personally, I would have loved to have seen a 5-hour cut because there was not 1 second where I was bored here. Every single minute, I was just enthralled by how great this film was. I wanted to keep on going. Usually one of my main complaints about films is that they're too long. This one, I never wanted it to end. This is one of the best sci-fi films I have ever seen. Now I will say, if you did not like part 1, will you like part 2? Maybe. I don't know. Because if you were confused by the mythology and lore of Dune from the first film, you're going to be confused here. Because the second part of the Dune story goes full and deep of all the lore and mythology. Once again, introducing completely weird names that you don't know what they mean, like the Kwisatz Haderach. If you don't know what that means going to Dune, I'm sorry, you're going to be pretty lost here because that specific word is very important to the story of Dune Part 2. And I will say another thing is that Part 2 does leave you off on a little bit of a cliffhanger, similar to the first film. Not as big as a cliffhanger, but the thing is that the story of Paul and Dune is not fully complete yet. The main conclusion is at the end of the second book, so we have to wait for one more movie before we get that full completion of this story. But you do end up leaving a bit more satisfied with this ending than you might have with the first ending of the first movie, because this one is an actual conclusion to the book of Dune. It's just that there's one more movie that we have to wait for to get that full conclusion. Guys, I mean, this film was just absolutely worth the wait. Just seeing this source material come to life on the big screen and being treated with so much respect and so much love by Denis Villeneuve. I just cannot believe a film like this was made in a day like this. It was supposed to be a book that could have never been adapted due to how complex it was. We now have, combining Dune 1 and Part 2, one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time, and Dune Part 2 is one of the greatest sci-fi films I have ever seen, and it absolutely deserves the holy top hat rating. Denis Villeneuve, I tip my top hat to you. You made a masterpiece. Guys, your first time here and you like what you've seen, be sure to subscribe for more content. And have you seen Dune Part 2? What did you think about it? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I hope you have a fantastic night, and as always, stay fancy.